Hey, it's Mark from Power BI at Work. Thank you for joining yet another video where we talk through the steps of Calculate. In this week's video, we're on the very last step and we're looking at step 5, Keep Filters. And what we're going to do is talk a little bit about the anatomy of Keep Filters, and then we're going to see some examples using the prior steps of how Keep Filters takes priority over creating new filter context and has influence over step 4 filters, which were table expressions or arguments in our Calculate that represented added filter context. It's going to take precedence over Calculate modifiers, even though I'm not sure why we would do it. I'm going to do a small example where we show where Keep Filters has an influence over these modifiers. And then finally, step 2 and step 1. Step 2 specifically, Keep Filters is going to have an influence over, but all in an effort to protect the original filters that are coming automatically from our Canvas visual. And so the way that we showed this when we went through step 4 is we used a measure that was just simply a calculate with a sales expression or a reference to a sales measure. And then the calculate argument that we put in afterwards was many part description equals masking tape. And so me as a newbie would put that expression there and expect to only get a sales result in my measure when I hit masking tape. And you can see here with our result that we not only get the $70 related to masking tape here in this visual row, but we also get it in all the other descriptions in our part table. Why is that? Well, it can be a little confusing up here as we just write this simple predicate expression where we're saying all I want is when my description equals masking tape, that's when I want to see sales. But if we expand this measure and we put on our DAX glasses and we can see beyond this simple predicate expression, this is going to be actually what the full DAX table expression looks like. And if you remember, when we were talking about these table expressions, we had a table expression called all, which ignored filter context by providing a complete list of values returned in our measure. So even though we're on this row office tape, and that's the current filter context, step 1 filters, right? Automatically coming from our canvas. Because we're later in the filtering process or the filter context process, and we're up in step 4, if we return a table that ignores that step 1 canvas filter, and we get a table that includes all of the descriptions, then this becomes my overriding table. This is going to overwrite this filter context specifically here for office tape. And instead of getting office tape, I'm getting all of the descriptions back as a filter that I added as a developer that's going to take precedence. And if I have all of that information and then my filter condition here is to filter all of those descriptions down to masking tape, then I'm essentially going to be getting the total for masking tape sales for every description. Filter is a table expression. All is a specific table expression that I'm handing to filter as the table argument that undoes this filter context by returning all of the values. Now that I have that unwound and I'm showing all of the descriptions here, then it gives me a chance in my filter expression to filter all of those part descriptions down to masking tape. And that's why I see all of these cells here representing sales for masking tape. Let's go back to the predicate and let's talk a little bit about keep filters. What keep filters does is it's meant to protect those earlier filters coming from step one. So I'm going to put a keep filters surrounding this simple, what looks like a condition, but we know it's actually a table expression using filter. And I'm going to hit enter. And what we're going to see is instead of getting all of the masking tape sales listed over all of the descriptions, I'm now only seeing it on the masking tape row. Probably what I was looking for anyway, right? Well, it's because I've used this final step that takes precedence over all of the earlier steps, and it's called keep filters. What keep filters does, well, let me talk a little bit about kind of what my impression of keep filters was early on. When I saw keep filters in this argument wrapped around this expression here, I assumed that keep filters had something to do with keeping this filter in place. But actually, keep filters is meant to protect the original filters that we don't see. So it's meant to protect these filters coming from step one from being overwritten by this table expression right here that we saw created a filter all over the description. And so what that means, or how I visually view this, is that keep filters is providing a padlock or a lock over this expression right here, and it's preventing it from escaping from this argument and impacting that earlier step in step one. So I view it as a lock. I view it as keep filters creating a bear hug around this expression, all in the attempt to protect these filters that come earlier from being affected. So what happens if we have office tape and masking tape as competing filters? Well, in our new filter context, it is impossible to have office tape and masking tape in the same row of those products in our model. And so we correctly get 0 results. The only time that it works, obviously, is when we've got an initial filter, step one, coming from our canvas that is equal to masking tape in the product table, and our table expression up here is also evaluating to the same expression or to the same product description. In this case, they match up, they line up, and we do get sales results filtered in our sales table that equal $70. All right, let's go further down our steps. We're starting from step 4. We're working our way back to step 2. We're going to stop really quick and talk about modifiers. I only want to show this because I'm talking about why keep filters is held to the end, and that it all actually influences all of the prior calculate steps, even calculate modifiers. And I'll say that sometimes when you're learning about keep filters, they can be kind of mixed in with the topic of calculate modifiers, but keep filters is specifically different in that it's not modifying a model structure like a relationship or a filter over a table column like calculate modifiers do. It is modifying the calculate argument directly itself. All right, so let's take a look at this measure where we have sales all, and you can see here that we're using a calculate. The expression is sales measure, and the calculate argument has a modifier, remove filters. We just talked about all. All is a table function, and it ignores filter context by returning all of the values. Remove filters here is removing the filters from our model. They're removing the filters over the columns specifically in our tables in the model. So we've removed filters here over the entire part table, and that's why you see that we're getting 686 right here all the way throughout the results on the canvas. There are no filters over any part of this part table, which are actually being filtered here in step 1 from the canvas. We've removed those filters, so it has no choice but to return the grand total of sales. To show that Keep Filters has an influence over this part, I'll just wrap this around Keep Filters, and remember that we're providing a lock that is going to trap remove filters, or this argument in Calculate, from having its effect on earlier filters from step 1. And when we do that and we hit enter, you'll see that this 686 is now respecting filter context coming from the canvas, because we've blocked this remove filters from breaking out and going and overwriting or removing filters over these current filters right here that we see in our visual. All right, well, let's keep going. Let's go to step 2. This one was a little more complex in that we had to create a hierarchy to generate and show when there can be a filter conflict between step 1 and step 2. And if you remember, we created a total sales wrong measure here, which involved using a SumX iterator over the values of the week. And the issue here was that for the filter context coming from step 1 represented a hierarchy. So please go back and watch that video if you want to learn more about this. But the step 1 filters up here looked somewhat like this, where we had individual isolated filters that were specific to the month of January, week 3 and week 4, as shown right here, and then a separate filter over February and week 1 and 2 right here in this part of the visual. But when we wanted to calculate the total of sales over the week, and we used an iterator like this, we needed to create a table expression. And when we created that table expression, we only used the week number as our table expression. This is going to be applied to our expression in our SumX, which is the sales measure. And if we remember, the existence of the sales measure included a calculate that is implied that we can't see wrapped around it. But what this creates is called context transition. So we've talked a lot early on about Calculate's ability to wake up, look around in its environment, pull in filters automatically from either the canvas or, in this case, the row context in our table expression. That is what's actually happening here. Because we have a measure reference that has that invisible calculate wrapped around it, it is pulling in each row that is filtered here in our table expression. So it's pulling in the week numbers one row at a time, and it's providing them as filters over this measure here, sales measure. And because context transition here is represented as step 2, it takes precedence over our earlier filters in step 1. And that means that this hierarchy here that we created is going to be overwritten. And so what that turns into are filters that look now like this. Now we have January and February because we've stripped the week number out of this hierarchy right here. So it essentially just looks like this. Now we've just got this filter over the 2 months, January and February. And because we used context transition with SumX only over the week number, that means that in the grand total row right here, we have all weeks exposed, 1 through 4. Up here, it's fine because we've got month specific to weak number, and we maintain that hierarchy. But here at the very bottom, where we have everything exposed, we have no filters like we have up here. Now we're filtering January and February and weeks 1 through 4. So that's why we end up getting the grand total, is because now we're filtering over January week 1 through 4, February week 1 through 4, and we get that total of 686. Obviously incorrect, because the filtered 112 and the filtered 165 do not equal 686. Well, you can imagine that an option here to protect those original filters is keep filters. It can be tempting to put keep filters around this expression, because we saw with calculate in that last example that we were putting keep filters in the following arguments. But keep filters specifically protects those table filter arguments from overwriting those previous filters. So it makes sense that we would this time want to put it around the first argument right here, which does in fact represent that table expression that becomes filter context in the form of that iteration row over row. So we're going to wrap keep filters around the table expression here, similar to the calculate filter arguments as tables, and we're going to hit enter, and we're going to see that those step 1 or those hierarchy filters from step 1 are protected and do in fact create the correct total here, because now we've turned that overwriting ability into an and condition with those earlier filters. All right, well, that's calculate. That's all 5 steps. And I'll just say at the end of this, what we're doing is we're creating what's called new filter context. And that new filter context is meant to go back and replace the spot in the original filter context, in the original visual. And so even when we were working with this sales all measure and it was returning, let's take out keep filters real quick so we can see a difference here. But even though we were returning a modified result and it was different from our sales, this is returning new filter context into the cell locations or the spots in the visual that represent the original filter context. All right, well, that's the video. Thank you for watching. If you were helped by this video, if you've enjoyed this series, please press like, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be publishing a lot more content beyond this series in Calculate. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.